Is the camera working or not working? Okay. Whew. I was like, gotta send another link. Hi again, Brian, and yay, thanks for being here. Okay, so I'm gonna actually like just chill out because this is something that was one of my favorite presentations ever. So I'm gonna actually like introduce it a little bit. Hopefully you guys find it helpful about the context of how it came about. So I'm gonna introduce it. I'm gonna go through Brian's like massive comment, which I've been meaning to get to. So I'm gonna just read through it and then answer it. And then I'm still deciding whether to go with Joshua's comments or to go to Claudia's comments after. I don't know if you saw, but like if you've been on the video, there's this person called Claudia who like posted like four different things. And I have a lot to say about it, but I have to be measured and professional because we I've, there's this so-called image that I have to keep up. But I'm gonna be authentic about how I feel about certain comments that I receive, and hopefully that is something that gives you permission to be authentic in real life as well. So okay, to start off, like the context of this presentation was during my second semester of aesthetics. I really disliked my first semester, and I do think it's the professor's fault. Like, oh my god, don't come for me. No, but well, am I gonna be authentic? Okay. Basically, I really don't think that the issue is the content because I thought that what was being told to us was like super interesting at the beginning. Like I thought, there's this like language is so fun, right? So it's like garder is keep in French, regarder is again keep. So when you have a painting, it's because you want to look at it. So it's like regarder. So it's like you want to re-keep it, and it's the idea of painting coming from this absence, the fact that we want to fill this absence. So we have a lover. The lover is not there because he's gone to war. So we paint our lover so that we can keep our lover. And also like painting people who've passed away or like doing portraits. It's really this idea of like maintaining something that we love despite absence. So it's kind of like the first kind of defiance against death, which I think was like super cool. Um, and also like there were a few comments that like Claudia made that like I mean I'll get to it when I get to it, but it just really like the really cool and interesting thing about YouTube, and there are many things because again it's been really helpful with me learning how to present my ideas because that is our job to like make to bring down like to continue the idea of like passing down knowledge and culture, which is something that I talked about one here. There's like culture that I was talking about in my last video with Confucianism, the difference between culture and civilization. Culture being the accumulation, the heritage, and the passing down of technology, information. One second, I'm sorry. Okay, I love using my hands though. That's the thing. Okay, so yeah, the context was that the first semester, while it was really intriguing, I just felt like what was expected for us to like be said was just in this very confined space. And I really don't think that the issue is that we were not that we were restricted to like ancient Greek texts like Plato, Aristotle. It wasn't that Plotin. I don't know how you say it in English, but it's like it's not Plato, it's Plotin, which he also said like really interesting things about art. But yeah, like first semester, wasn't a big fan. Found out the second semester it was actually more important than the first semester, and I was like, I am doomed. This is terrible because if I don't find it interesting, I can't study for it. But second semester was really great because we had an amazing professor. He was all over the place, kind of like me sometimes. But it's just like, when you have so many ideas, you're like, which road do I take? That kind of vibe. So he's really like that. And a lot of the other professors were just doing Kant's third critique, critique de la faculté de juger, the critique of the faculty of judgment. And that's about art, but it's not just about art. If like reading the introduction, because I had to do something a little bit about that book, is that the first critique is about pure reason, and then the second critique is about practical reason. So the first critique is basically the critique on the fact that reason itself thinks that it's so powerful that it kind of goes on its own tangent, and it thinks that it knows everything, it can find like it can discover everything, which is Kant's critique on pure reason. And then the second one is about like, how do we it inches on morals, so basically how reason translate to universal morality. And then that's how you get the not the categories, but what was that thing called? Uh the imperative categoric categoric imperatives. So it's just like, don't treat other people as a means to an end, all that stuff. It's just like, universal rules, never lie. And then there's the question of like, if a Gestapo was at your door and you're hiding, you're safeguarding like Jewish people, like, do you lie? Those kind of questions. And Kant would be like, no, you don't. So problems. So yeah, he was really cool. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, finishing my thought. So the third critique is basically the reconciliation or the synthesis of the first and the second. It is about this question of how can we have a way of being through reason, decided through reason, applicable into daily life? Like, how does that work against this idea of happiness and against this idea of experiences in context? How does reason decided without experience, a priori, actually find its place in experience? And that's the third critique. So it's not just about, oh, like what is aesthetics, what's art. It's much more loaded than that. So a lot of other tutors were just doing that. Our tutor was really cool in terms of he gave us like a plethora of ideas. He like split them up in like a lot of different categories, like classical idea of beauty, and like transformative idea of beauty, and like, using like, there is Kant, and then there is like Schiller, there is like obviously Aristotle, Plato, and then like architecture, and the different realms and different our different relationships uh, to beauty, and not just through Kant's delineation. Although we did do quite a lot of Kant, he loves a citation, so it's like this is massive wall, and you're just like, oh, this is so aesthetically confronting because it's so big. Okay, wait, let me just aesthetics. Yeah, it is a hairball because I don't know like if sorry, I have like so much to say, but honestly, like Wittgenstein, like that summary that I did, I genuinely think it's like one of the most eye-opening things that I've read, just because like it very clearly like talks about and suggests like how is it that aesthetics is linked to morals? Because there's this. I don't know if I've said this like a thousand times because it's very well known, but it's like the Greek saying of kalos kagatos, which is beauty and good. So it's this couple of beauty and good that is inseparable. So like that, and we keep thinking like, oh, if we look at a person who's beautiful and there's a halo effect, and we have all these like negative feelings of like why it is that we can actually be seduced by beautiful people to think that they're good, or like other like the other sayings like don't judge a book by its cover. Just because they're not attractive doesn't mean that they're a horrible person. There's like, it's not just psychology. Is it just psychology? But there's just this long lineage of why it is that we think that something that is aesthetically pleasing is good. And it's the same as like, now with not now with Plato, but with Plato, something that I wrote in my finals dissertation was that like he said that, love, if you read what's it called, banquet, the banquet, if you read the banquet, love or démon is the thing that helps guide us towards the supreme good. And démon is love and pleasure, eros. So like the good has to be pleasurable for us to get to the ultimate good. And but then after that, I used Aristotle to critique it, being that like if it's good, but you need good to be pleasant, then it means that good is not actually good. Like there's something lacking in good, and if good lacks something, then how can it be good? So with that critique in mind, think about like every time like you're trying to learn something new. It like for me, like with languages, like listening to music, and like to what do you call it? If something is presented in a pleasing way, you are able to achieve reason better. That's why they say like try to find pleasure in the pain. It's kind of like reason and reasoning itself is very difficult and painful because you are working. It's an active activity that you choose to engage in. And if it's something that you've not done before or you're not comfortable with, of course it's not going to be pleasant because you don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, so with that coupling in mind, yeah. So I don't know where this tangent came from or where it's been going, but yeah, just a lot of oh yeah, Wittgenstein. So just about how he really talks about how the way that we describe art and the way that we describe even our clothes is kind of like describing ways of being. This idea that in the back of our minds, there's this idea of what is correct, this objective rule of correctness that we've learned in life. I think this is okay. I'm just gonna keep moving my hands. Correctness that actually is shared amongst everyone, and that is why like even if we say that a lot of things are subjective, there are a few certain things that we don't delineate from in terms of everyone else. And then the question then becomes like the idea of whether it's a norm or whether it's baseline. Everyone agrees that sugar is sweet and something else is bitter. And then you could say like people prefer bitter and people prefer sweet. But the perception and the reception of this is categorized or experienced in a similar way, even if the reaction to this experience could be different. So yeah, that's that part. But yeah, so the assignment came with this non he literally just said like, okay, so and if anyone wants like bonus points like to present an idea for 10 minutes on the aesthetic experience, and this is like the second class, so no one has any idea what the aesthetic experience is. And he's like, if anyone wants to present, just you can take the floor for like 10 minutes. And at first I was just like, yeah, why not get like extra points and everything? Like it doesn't hurt because it's so easy to get a terrible grade for nothing. So I was like, okay, why not? And I actually had a friend that went up. She like painted. She's her name is Lena. She's the one who actually did the presentation before me, and she had two of her paintings up. She like presented Merleau-Ponty's the eye and the spirit of the eye. It's his book on aesthetics, and yeah, like it was just so powerful because the one moment that she described, she did this whole description about scent and flowers and color and handwriting, but the most moving part was when she started talking about the moment right before she painted. She said she was like, I don't know, it was just it was at night, and I smelled like I don't know which flower she smelled. She's like, but I smelled the aroma of flowers and I saw purple, and then I painted and she like showed her purple flowers, and like it was just so moving. It was so like it was so simple, and it's so like and then that's the thing, like the question, it was really about like whether the aesthetic experience is just something you experience in a museum. You see a great piece of art and you're like and then like throughout the whole classes there were all like a lot of questions about like, oh yeah, like is something that is not, if is an over he showed us a video of like people who are overweight and like a guy who actually goes like, yeah, like it's a choice but I still love to dance. And he's showing us like all these things because he's the kind of guy that also like um it's like, we all know that watching a video of people who do not have belly dancer bodies dance ballet is something that we all will have a specific judgment towards. That's not like that is beauty and that is grace. But the way he presented it just was like a question for us to ask ourselves, like, okay, why is it that we have this reaction over people who are just having joy and dancing? And like, what kind of criteria in our heads do we have that we associate with the ballet and people who are allowed to enjoy the ballet, that we would classify them as elegant and beauty? So all that in mind, I went home and I was like pacing around behind you, so not like my little study area. I was like pacing back and forwards, being like, "What is the aesthetic experience?" And I kept reading like books that was just so uninteresting. And that's why like one thing you notice about my presentation is like I don't really quote anyone. I try to do this phenomenological thing before actually even understanding phenomenology. And I mentioned in my presentation that my tutor said to me, oh yeah, like Heidegger would totally like destroy what you're saying. And I was just like, F it. And he's like, read like the origin of the work of art. And I was like, okay. And I read it, and I read it really quickly. I think it was about like 60 pages. And I was in the library and I just gotta have kind of like some kind of reference point to make my argument strong because that's what we do as philosophers. We don't just say things, we have foundation and ideas. And I just like looked at it and I was like, I don't like it. I read his thing. Maybe I read it too quickly, most probably. Maybe, I don't know, but I read The Origin of Art and I was just like, okay, like three of three of Heidegger's writings that I read are mind blowing. Like they were amazing, and two of them I'm presenting for a book club. But that particular thing, I'm just like, okay, that's your opinion. Cool. It's not very interesting, but cool. And then I was like trying to read like Merleau-Ponty, but it just didn't stick. I didn't have time to read Wittgenstein yet because it was like 100 pages, and my presentation was like due in 2 weeks. So I just really had no reference point of who I wanted to quote because everything that I was reading, I didn't like. I didn't agree, and obviously I don't agree with Kant because it's just so like it's the same like when I asked my phenomenological tutor to like to define beauty, he's like, I can't. And he went like in 3 circles, and in the end, I'm just like, so what's the definition? He's like, you can't define beauty, and I'm like, that's the definition, like, because the thing is, like, if you can, then you didn't do it right. And I was like saying this to my language partner. Sorry, I'm like really excited, but like, saying this to my language partner. There's a difference between defining something and describing something. And this is just like something that I riffed off. Like maybe I'll take this back in the future, whatever. But as for now, like when you define something, you're excluding everything that it's not. Sure, you get like a pretty like delineation and picture of what it is that you think something is, but you are excluding like a complete realm of what it could be. It's like with phenomenology about science and probability, right? Like yeah, scientific theory tells me that in highest probability the sun will come up tomorrow, and there's like science, statistics science tells me that this is the majority of what people think, but I'm like, the majority is not everything. The majority is just the most of us, but that doesn't mean that the minority doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that the things that don't statistically make it to the top didn't have 10 or 15 people like how do you say, like, cocher, ticking off that box. It exists. So in the same way, like with beauty, it's like once you start defining it, like difference between describing it is that I am describing my relationship with something, but it doesn't exclude a relationship or an experience that I haven't had yet with beauty or love or anything that I want to define. And it's just like something that I really thought about. So after like walking back and forth like for a really long time, at some point I was just like, okay, like it's an experience, so then let's think about like a proper experience that I've had that really moved me. And yeah, like, Artemisia Gentileschi, like I mentioned that I read about her during my internship, and I was going to Italy, and I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna hunt out like a few of her stuff, like to just really see it in real life. Because that little square of it was like pretty interesting, but I was just like, oh, but what if like I went there and I looked at it like big scale, you know? So I went and I was like searching, I kept asking, like, I was in the Uffizi and I was like asking like, where is like what was it called? Giuditta di Capita alle Ferne. I was like, where is it? And they were like, oh, it's towards the end. And I was just like trying not to rush the whole museum just for this one piece. I arrived and I was like, I am impressed. You are a beautiful piece of work, but it's like kind of like, I don't know how you explain it, and I think that's the whole point of my assignment. But it's like kind of like it's not negligible. It's not like, oh yeah, you're pretty blah. Like, I don't care. It was like I was like, I get it and I think you're beautiful, but like there's nothing more to do. Like I'm just looking at you and you're great and you're amazing. And then okay. But then like in class, like, there's all these questions about like what is like, is it something that like throws you off? And then there's a question of sublime and can't sublime where it's like, it's like something that is like, le foi, like fear with like, it's not just like pleasure. Sublime is not just pleasure. There's a sorry. I'm just like so excited. So the sublime is not just like pleasure, but again, like if I'm not gonna, there's a very clear definition of what the sublime is, so I'm not gonna paraphrase it because it's just gonna be not there. So yeah, it was just questions like that. And also during class, like one time I just realized like at some point we in French we say like Plato's the bien suprême, like the supreme good is le beau. So I was just like, it is always like l'idée du beau, the idea of beauty. And I was just like, okay, like it's beau, okay, what? And then like, but then in class, like, he asked us at some point to define beauty. And I don't remember exactly. Oh yeah, I said it was the image of truth. I said, c'est l'image de la vérité. And he like smirked. And I'm just like, just say it's a good idea, dude. Like it's totally fine. You can totally give me credit. But of course, like now I don't completely agree with that notion because I don't think that the beauty is just sight perception. I think it's like an emotion and feeling as well. So yeah, like I then like asked him, I was just like, why is it that you asked us what to define beauté and not beau? And he couldn't really give me an answer. And I was like, because they both mean beauty, but then for some reason, like there are a lot of times with art we ask the feminine form, and yet in like classical texts we use the masculine form. Maybe it's a question of just misogyny. Like I don't know, like, but it's a very clear thing that like we do not, well, the French, I'm not French, like they do not associate the same thing when they say beau and beauté. And I found that really interesting. So yeah, like I asked him after class, and he's just like, I never thought about it. You could write something about it, and then all these things are just like adding and accumulating. And before I start, the last thing I want to say is that the very beginning, I started with reason. And the reason is the question that I asked my tutor from the first semester, because during the last class, he was saying something, and at that time, I was already back from Italy, and I was actually in front of David and I made a video about him. I'll like link it in this after, but sorry. I was in front of David for like 2 hours because it was the only museum that I had to line up for is at the academia, because I didn't think that I would actually care about David anyway, but I was just like, "Oh, when am I gonna come back to Florence? Like, I might as well go." I'm sitting in front of this guy for like 2 hours, and I'm just like, "I feel nothing. I don't even find you beautiful." Like, and I was like, "What's?" It's like, "Is it me? Like, am I the problem?" And I was like trying to like, I'm like, "Yeah, I like it's technique, it's amazing." But a small like tangent was that outside Lafitte, I was talking to this street artist, and like, it was like before I went in, we talked, and then when I came out, we talked, and he asked me like what did I think of like one of Michelangelo's like masterpiece in the Uffizi, and I was just like I wasn't like moved, and I showed him like some other unknown like artists who did like something much simpler, and he basically just put me down as someone who doesn't understand technique, and that's the reason why I can't understand the beauty and the amazing proportions and again technique that was implemented or employed by Michelangelo in that piece of artwork that I don't know the name of because I wasn't attached enough to actually learn its name. So yeah, same question in front of David, and like my tutor in front of class was just talking about symmetria, like which is proportion, and like talking about like how the essence in art and like how that's how we recognize things and how it like makes things intelligible to us because art is not just pleasing; it's supposed to like be part of reason, etc., etc., etc. And all of this is again, if you don't know, Plato's idea of idée, like monde idée, the world of ideas, is just that because we follow by essence. I feel like I already said this 1,000 times, but just because, like we participate in essence. So okay, so my hand, you only recognize it as a hand because this sensible object participates in the idea of a hand. So that's why it's recognizable to you. If we didn't have the idea of a hand, no one would recognize this as a hand. That's Plato's idea. So in that way, because David is the embodiment or participates in the essence of symmetria, that's how we have an intelligible idea of what proportion means. Because he is the physical, tangible representation of what it is. So that being said, like, um, bye. Oh my god, I'm already talking for so long and I haven't answered anything. I'm so sorry. Wow, I'm so sorry. Okay. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, I guess I'm just gonna cut myself short and just basically say the last question. I'm so sorry. I was just so excited. Okay. But yeah, like basically like the question I sent him was not a thesis question. And I feel like from Brian's response, you're taking it as if like it's a well-rounded a completely thought out question interrogation. It's probably like the first step. You like for me like a step for any dissertation or any true interrogation, self questioning is that you have like this thing that just doesn't make sense to you, and then you just write it out. So the thing that I wrote, I knew it presented really well, but it was just something that I wrote in like 10 minutes when I got home, when I was like, I just like really needed to answer these questions. But that being said, I'm just gonna go and actually answer them. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just gonna read you and answer you like as we go along. And I'm so sorry. Like I know I said 30 minutes, but if you have to go, you have to go. But I will just like, do my best. Okay. So the human quotes are center of taste. Okay, so you're not sure about the reference to Aristotle. Basically, like the what we've understand about reason is that it's through the principle of non-contradiction. So it's like because we get rid of the things that contradicts whatever it is that we have arrived at as knowledge, that's how we decide what is true and what is false. It's like you can't have two at the same time, and that's how judgment works. So that's why like I use the triangle where it's like we have all this information and then we put them in relation to each other until we find out where the contradictions are. We take away the contradictions, and then that's how we end up with reasoning. Question is the okay, maybe it's good if I just read this out loud. Is the art prominent due to the essence of symmetry? Do you mean formal beauty? See, that's like the interesting thing. Like my tutor taught us about like formal beauty, and yeah, symmetria would be in that category, like classical beauty. Um, is the artwork prominent due to the essence of symmetria? My question there, does that mean a human ideal? Yeah, okay. My question there was basically saying that like is David actually like the embodiment of human proportion, or is it that we are taught that to identify him as the ideal of human proportion? So when I say like the norm, it just means like the highest consensus at the time who just went like, oh yeah, David's amazing. He embodies the essence of symmetria. And people who don't agree with that are stupid instead of them just not being part of the norm. That was my question. And no, I don't mean that like proportion means the ideal, human ideal. Are these good proportions influenced by social norms? Is beauty just a social construct? See, and that's the whole game of like the aesthetic experience of like figuring out what beauty is. And again, like with that Wittgenstein paper, it's really helpful to understand that yeah, there's a subjective perception, but that's only like a variation within an objective game of what he calls like the aesthetics. He defines aesthetics as a game. Are we mistaking opinion for essence? Again, not sure what you mean by this. Yeah, so again, is it because someone said that it's essence, or is it just a opinion of a huge consensus? So it's not actually the essence of symmetria, but it's just a group of people who have this opinion, dominant opinion, that David is the embodiment of the essence of symmetria. Are we again, not sure what you mean by essence. Again, like the essence thing is just something that was just really piled on us during my class in my first semester. I again like define essence in my other video as just like the most important quality of a certain object that qualifies its existence. So like I guess my essence would be a human being at the end. Like it's the most necessary. Everything else probably, I mean, you have to watch the Buddhism video, it's there, but uh Plato's definition of essence is what is it? Oh, I'm gonna lead you astray. Aristotle doesn't use essence, does he? I don't want to lead you completely astray, but essence would be idea. Idea as in like the most pure form of whatever it is that we can think of. Again, it's not a hand in the world, but it's like the idea of the hand. So it's like the most like I just don't wanna say something just to, like, sound like I'm telling you something. So let me come back to it if, like, I have a better reformulation of what essence is. Okay. Um, is anyone who does not appreciate David just unrefined, at least patronize every way, or taste? Is essence absolute or relative? I think absolute by definition, but reception of beauty is relative. Yeah, again, I do think essence is absolute, but my question is like about the designation of essence. So yeah, David might have an essence, but who is the one who decides among us? Because we don't actually have like, well, that I know of, like a god that like comes down and goes like, so this one is symmetria, that is that, and we all, because you know I'm this divine being that tells you this is this. Who's the one who actually goes like, who's the first person who pronounces that David is has the essence of symmetria? It's a person. So that's why my question of like the designation of essence, is it relative or absolute? But essence in and of itself is absolute. Um, there are a number of ideas, reality, more important art, nature. Yeah, the whole thing that I talk about, like me, people who don't have the time and money to go to galleries and actually appreciate art. It's also the question of like, you know, there's the aesthetic experience outside of museums, and there's beauty in real life and not just art. I Right now I see art as the most intense form of beauty, or like a most intense uh expression of an experience, but it's not isolated or cut out from life because it is a part of life. But I guess we're talking about daily life or art life. But yeah, the whole idea of reality again, and with this whole idea of essence, is that with Plato's essence, we can only identify and see things in the real world because we participate in the essence of something, in the idea of something. And in that way, like yeah, cool. And in that way, like we can only understand the reality in our world if if we are apt at identifying essence. So then the question then becomes like, oh, can we only identify it? Do we have to identify the essence depicted in art, or is it enough to just look at it in real life? Or does the ones in real life don't count and the ones in art is more pure? So it's like, how intelligent are you based on your ability to capture essence? Let's take a page from Wittgenstein here, who has always been pointing out the real meaning of our language, and I said, how we use it. How do we use art and beauty? Yeah. So you know, like yeah, the whole thing about like words of affirmation is not in and of itself the thing that designates anything, but it's just a description of how we feel about something. Um, in this case of fine art, the church use later. Yeah. The rest of it's not a question. It's just Brian's opinion. So I don't think there's okay. I'm just gonna quickly do Claudia, and then I'm just gonna go to Joshua real quick. But yeah, so Claudia like left like four messages, and I just think it's really funny because like I'm open to like learning new things, but when people just write stuff like "You did not have a button for just ugly, did you?" You're just like you're just like so discredited from like me ever thinking that you have anything worth reading. It's like just because you have something to say doesn't mean it's worth addressing. At least like hide it a little bit if you have bad faith. But she does also say with a smiley face at the beginning, art is not a Rorschach test. So a Rorschach test is like a medical procedure in psychology where you show like blots of something, and then you get a patient to look at it to have like mental associations for, to identify like personality, and I'm pretty sure more so like personality disorders, because medicine is usually trying to find out like what's wrong with us and not what's right with us. Um, so yeah, I don't see okay, obviously, like, then you have to ask the question of like what is personality and what is self, and then that's like a whole behavioral thing. But I don't see why it's so far removed in terms of like when you look at art, it's supposed to, well, it's not supposed to do anything, but my association with art is that it is something that resonates with me, within me. And the only way it does that is if I see something in it that I recognize in myself. So to say that it's very far removed from a Rorschach test, I don't think that's sound. And also, like, I just really dislike when people use the word rape like so easily. Like in like French is like gratuit, like it doesn't matter. So it's like that also like irks me. It's like such feminist or not bullshit is in itself a rape of the common sense. Like, what do you mean like the rape of the common sense? Like a violation of the common sense? Like I think like there needs to be a bit more thought before you use like words like that. You can, I love saying the word fuck, like, I swear a lot, but it's just very off-putting. And I'm not trying to be like, oh, you can't, like, just, it's just, yeah. And also, like, what do you mean by meta bullshit? It's just, okay. So, just how can this story be linked to the idea of rape? It's a mythological tale which, quite in a biblical fashion, glorifies deceit and murder. Ay, okay. So I think like that's the thing that's missing, right? Like the like Artemisia Gentileschi was actually raped. Like she had a trial. Like and the whole point of like sublimation in art is like okay, so something I didn't mention, which was part of the conversation with Elizabetta, was that she said that no one actually goes to art for the art in and of itself, but they're there for stories. She's like, I heard people go around talking about Michelangelo because Casa Buonarroti is for Michelangelo, and it talks about like how Michelangelo was like punched in the nose by another painter, and that's why he has like a wonky nose. And I was just like, well, rape's not like equivalent to a wonky nose. And she's just like, no, but it's just that people are here for the stories, and stories are what makes people care about other people. And that's why storytelling is so important. And that's why she's okay with the sensationalization of Artemisia Gentileschi being known as a raped female artist and not just an outright artist, because in the end, her art is appreciated for it. So by using like mythological tales, it's like I don't know how to explain. Like you just need to understand that it's not totally separate from one another. Like it's a vehicle, it's a metaphor, it's an analogy, it's an allegory. It's something that you put something within something to propel a story further because it fits within a story that's not completely isolated or um, alienated from like the continual human condition. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to explain out of this because to me it's like, okay, clear. But the last thing she said was beauty is relational between the divine and the artist on one hand, and between the artist and the rest of humankind. It's revealing and concealing at the same time. And then the rest of it, she just kind of goes to like her own opinion of like what is. So it's like it's a gateway to other realms, and the most effective means to build anything from an individual psyche to societies it is inevitable though accessible in the same manner of to all who behold a piece of true art. Sorry, my face can't hide. Okay. It moves people's hearts together like a crest of a wave from the mysterious waters. Okay. Like if she just said this, it's a valid, I wouldn't say point, but we do talk about like how art was something that connects us with the divine and all that stuff. And Hegel talks about like how art is, conversation between us and the divine. But this just wouldn't stand in like school because like if you want to say anything, justify it. But I just yeah. So this was that, and then I don't know. She said something else, and she's like, "Do you want to defend yourself?" I'm like, "There's nothing really to defend. I don't really see an argument." Okay, so I'm just gonna finish up with like Joshua. Thank you for still staying. I know it's been like 30 minutes past. But I'm gonna quickly like pick two things about Joshua and see if anyone's written anything. I think I see a question mark, so I'll just do that. Okay, so yeah, I think like the questions kind of overlap between like Brian and Joshua. Um, and then the question like how can many beings who have many different subjective sensibilities all see David as beautiful? See, like when I receive like questions like that, it's just kind of like um I don't know how you guys answer questions, but it's like sometimes I just try to like anchor until like a point that the question is trying to make and build from there. But this feels more like a statement than a question, but it ends in a question mark. And then it goes to my question of what is beautiful. It's so scary because I did the whole presentation and then I'm now talking to you guys about this like months after thinking about what beautiful means and beauty means, and I still can't define it. So, welcome to philosophy. Are we doing anything? Okay, what I found interesting was that Joshua actually voted very similarly to most of my close friends. They did define the first one as the yeah. They did define the first one as beauty, beauté. So, beau, which is like admiration, is just kind of like I noticed that it's the pink Queen Elizabeth portrait that I did. It was just like something that was like very easily accepted as like something that is uh like well proportioned, or I don't know, like in a classical sense I could say like it's something that I don't think most people would look at that and actually have a very distinct reaction to, but it's not negligible. Like no one would that I know of. No one would look at the Queen Elizabeth painting and go like, "Well, that's terribly done," or like, "That's completely boring." Maybe, but that's why I gave the option of meh, which is kind of like I don't really relate at all. But the second one, which is really interesting, is when people chose not to vote, and that's how I define like beauty, beauté, the female beauty, where it's something that kind of like really like shocks you in a different way that makes you go like, oh, um, why is it that I'm having like this reaction? I don't completely find this completely outside. And also, by the way, in my opinion, to call something ugly is actually a reaction in and of itself that is like more um, noteworthy than someone who goes indifferent. And I kind of also feel like, with this idea of ugly, there's always like, a sense of like something that is questionably beautiful about something, but that is just kind of like either in the wrong composition or in the wrong order. But I think like ugly and beauté and sublime, I definitely think that beauté is much more the female version is much more complicated than the masculine version. Um, But yeah, again, I think it's like something that if I decide to go into aesthetics, I would have to flesh out a lot more. Um, there's this one other thing that Joshua wrote that I thought was worth like addressing. Okay, so if I understand correctly, like the last two things that was kind of talked about was like how Greeks. Okay, so he wrote like what the ancient Greeks described as the purpose of beauty is to make man better. Um, and I think, like, that's, like, something that I'm really struggling with at school where it's, like, when, like, we try to understand something, even me, like, when I'm reading stuff, like, because we're limited with, like, that's how it works, right? You only have your own, mindset and your own framework to work with. So when you're trying to, like, see something else, you try to make, like, relations and identities with what you know and what is in front of you. But I would say that, my definition or my play on beauté and beau has nothing to do with, like, this idea of completion or fulfillment or anything to do with Aristotle. Because, like, when I say, like, I go from the masculine form of beauty towards the female form of beauty, it's really not, like, me actually it's not actually me try like, it is an endeavor to complete myself in understanding that there's a lack, that, you can never be in all places at once. But in saying that, like, just because you reach the other end, it does not mean that you've completed yourself, because now you have a different kind of lack. You've changed your coordinates, and then you have a different one. And also, who's to say that you would actually reach beauty F, whatever beauty like beauty, the female F is to you at that time. So, like, for me, like, and again, like, it's something that I have to work on a lot more to really define what I'm trying to say. But it has nothing to do with like this finality or this sense of like that we already have an essence to complete, or that we have like a sense of self to complete. Is much more like with the aims of completion of like, because I know I'm at this point, because I know I'm here. I know I'm not there. And then because but there's something else that like Joshua said that I agree with, which is like there's this for me like humanity is the existential one where it's about the fact that we can change and develop and devenir, we can become. So, yes, there's a fulfillment of that if we choose to take the impetus to go towards our ideal self, but we never actually realize our ideal self because once we're there, there is another form of ideal self. And again, also like my example of two concurrent arts. So I chose like la violence as beauty, like violence, and also strength as beauty. And then I have softness and hope as beauté, like the female version of beauty, and they're all concurrent. So with that in mind, there's once you move here, they're all like linked and connected. So in that way, you never reach this like one ideal self of what you think you are. But it's just this for me, it's just literally about the human quest of like movement and searching themselves and just art being like the thing that shows us where we are and where we can be. So yeah, I'm so sorry this has been so long. I said 30 minutes, but I hope this was helpful. I'm just gonna read, I think there's one question mark. But whatever you describe or find in reality has something above to do those two concepts, right? What do you mean? Whatever you describe or find in reality has something above those two concepts of beauty and beauty. I'm not sure. The relationship is stabilized through the interaction with that is beyond those two ideas, in my opinion. What you describe or what you're able to find. That the relation is established through the interaction that is beyond those two ideas. But the concept are the things that create those relations though. Like if you have like a point and then you're why am I zoomed in like this? If you have like the point and the concept that you've identified, and then there's you of where you've identified yourself. They're concurrent. They're not there's not one above the other, unless I'm misinterpreting what you're saying. I say that all in relation with beauty and the relation with us. I don't know what that means. Uh from 40 years from now, we are still going to be thinking about beauty is. And isn't that beautiful? I think that's the whole point. Beauty is not just to make us better. I'd argue that women way early in human history found beauty in foods. Mm, yeah, um, not sure what that sentence means, but mm, okay. Okay, I'm gonna awkwardly end this now, but thank you for staying throughout. I hope the introduction of like the beginning of how I actually got to creating this theory was interesting to you because yeah, I think like as I go forward and stuff, it's really interesting. Like obviously, like our job is to interpret other philosophers, like great thinkers, and incorporate them. But like my pottery teacher says, you have to do everything all at once. You can't just fix the outside and build the inside. You have to build the inside while fixing the outside. So this is like my first presentation where I really felt like I had to like I couldn't lean on any specific author on what aesthetics experience is or what beauty is, but to take like different notions from Plato and obviously like the structures of the way we think through Aristotle to try to arrive at something that I think to me is very close to what I would define the reason behind why it is that each of us have different relationships with things that we call or designate as beauty, and also like the two different main resonances or things that most of us would say that does not escape us in terms of when we describe something as beautiful and how it plays in relation to like our daily lives and also like our like outside our ideal like our daily lives, like how we conceive our ideal self. So yeah, thank you, and thank you for being here. Bye, Adam.